Welcome to the Attract Your Ideal Clients podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs who sell their expertise, including trainers, consultants, and coaches looking for real world, actionable marketing advice to help them identify their competitive strengths, find and fix the marketing bottlenecks that are holding them back, and confidently make the right marketing decisions for their unique business. Today, we'll be talking about authenticity, specifically embracing an authentic approach to marketing and selling your services, doing what feels like the right fit for you and your clients, and the importance of making sure that your business is aligned with your nature and values. Joining me today are Julie Trich and Emily Adams, co-founders at Transformative Leadership. Quick note, I've recently updated the show name from Attract Your Ideal Customers to Attract Your Ideal Clients to align more with the specific needs of trainers, consultants, and coaches. Now, before we get started, if you've hit a plateau in your training, consulting, or coaching business, I want to invite you to visit marcusschaller.com/subscribe for weekly troubleshooting guides and tips to help you find and fix the weak spots in your marketing that are holding you back, fine-tune your positioning and marketing strategy, and start growing again by attracting more of your ideal clients. Again, that's marcusschaller.com/subscribe. So to start out, I would like to ask either or both of you, just for context, to share what it is y'all do.
Emily, I'll let you take it away.
The short version of it, I would describe it as transforming business and humans at the same time in a very effective and efficient way. And the reason why I use effective and efficient is when we think transformation, a lot of times people will think, oh, this is going to take like a year, or it's going to take me a decade. But we have seen some of our clients transform within 30 minutes of being on a call with us. And that's one of our unique things is we have played in the corporate realm. We have played in the small business realm to know this is the quickest way we can get a transformation. And also the reason why we customize all our packages, because we don't want to put you in a 12-month program when we can get you the results in a week and you can go about your business. And we also don't want to work with you for the rest of your life, because that is not efficient for us and not efficient for you. If you're working with us for the rest of your life, we are not doing our job unless you're growing right alongside with us, because we both know that we will always be growing and evolving. And so as we grow and evolve and shift, so will our clients, if they, stay with us on our retainer or whatever we do. So the short version of it is transformation, change. But if you want to get into like the nuts and the bolts, is like cost savings, processes, leadership. And we develop leaders in a very specific way of a mix of self-development, spirituality, and corporate tools mixed together, along with some intuition. And I'll let Julie add anything that I missed.
Like a lot of intuition, I think, right? Yeah, so we take a very holistic approach to business. And it's fun because all of these topics have come up today, like the not having people in packages. Like we're so often when we work with other people or we go on other podcasts, people are like, well, what's the free program that you offer? Or what's a program that you offer? And we're like, we don't like, do we need to make one to like, I just had someone that we were talking about earlier this week. She was like, well, what's a program that you guys, can you send me a program you guys have and I'll put it on our website for blah, 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 blah. So people, for the outreach. And I'm like, I don't have a program. So we had a conversation about it. I'm like, do we make something or like, do we whatever? And she's like, no, I'm not here for it. I'm like, okay. She's like, if you want to, and you feel like inspired and called to create a program, like we could do that and I'll support you in whatever you want and need. But like, she's like, for me personally, I don't think and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like we really don't need to. And it just goes back to everyone is not cookie cutter. And we don't do cookie cutter stuff. Like we're all individuals. We all have so many different facets and areas and, everything to look at, and it's all different and it's all beautiful. So like, if I was like, you're going to take 6 months, how do I know that? Right? Like, I don't know that. Like,
Totally.
we've had people tell us before that we gave them more of a transformation in like 30 minutes
Hmm.
than the coach they had just worked with that they paid $30,000 to.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
really eye-opening, I think, for everybody.
Well, so many things to unpack with that, but the first thing it brings to mind for me is uh the no, I forgot the term for it. There's a name of this, but basically work fills up essentially the amount of time we give it, right? So if you say a project's going to take 3 months, it's miraculous how it always takes at least 3 months, if not longer, right? So our expectations of what it takes, what it really means to be transformative, right? Because ultimately it could be one idea, it could be one insight. Like Julie, the other day when I talked to you about it, all the books behind me, like these are treasures to me because in the top row are books that have had at least one or more insight that completely changed my whole way of looking at the world. So it's a great point, and it's a great lead into what we were going to talk about today primarily was, you know, essentially when you're marketing yourself, whatever that we want to say that means, when you're trying to attract the right clients, when you're trying to get the word out, build your brand, whatever, right? That there's this kind of traditional marketing, which might include here's our packages. And that might be perfectly relevant to some people. It's like it's sometimes it's really useful to have something very clear, right? But then versus authentic what's your authentic approach to this? And they don't have to be mutually exclusive at all. But when we met the other day, we were talking about what we could talk about on a podcast, right? It was like, you mentioned that. I was like, oh, I love it. I love it. Let's talk about that, right? And so rather than try to like me confine it to what I think it means, Julie, to start out, like, why don't you just riff a little bit about what that means to you? And then, Emily, just love to hear your thoughts too. So to kind of start out at a high level, because I know a lot of people that I'm trying to serve are like, first of all, marketing sucks. They don't like it. They don't like selling. They don't want to do any of this stuff, right? And so if they're going to do it at all, it has to feel good. It has to feel right for them. So why don't you just kick us off with that?
Man, we've gone through so many iterations of marketing and what marketing looks like, and people trying to sell us things like, oh yeah, you'll, with this guarantee and with that guarantee, but then the process was not in alignment with us. And throughout that process, they completely changed, or we allowed them to completely change. Like they wanted us to niche down, and we're like, don't, we don't do that. And they're like, well, if you, pick a target, that we're speaking to, and then we can develop like the verbiage and the framework for that. And, so we tried this approach, and we tried that everything that they wanted us to do, we adapted and we pivoted to, we're like, okay, we're just going to be really coachable, right? We're going to be really coachable. We're going to do these things, even though I think we both had so much resistance during the process because it wasn't us. It wasn't aligned to our mission and to our vision and to ultimately why we started doing what we do. And then we just ended up coming full circle, right? We came completely back to the original intention, the original mission, and the original vision. So I think for us, marketing has been a huge opportunity for learning and for us to really be able to like stand in our individual truth and also in the truth of the business. Because I know that we both believe like everything is a consciousness and everything's energy, and even your business is a consciousness. It has a consciousness, but if you don't look at it that way, you could be doing things that are completely out of alignment for you and for your business, and then you're not going to get shit. You're not going to get anywhere, right? So I think that's broad scope for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would just add to like the whole marketing piece really, it goes back to like there's thousands of ways you can market someone. And I just made a post about this today, I think on Threads. It was like everybody will try to tell you how to run your business, but no one is out there trying to teach you how to run it that is in alignment, that is in authenticity with you as a human. This was your business. This is your blueprint. So stop looking for a blueprint, including marketing for something that's going to work, Because for years I did this, and you can ask Julie, like, we just need a strategy that's going to work. We just need one strategy, right? But shocker, we had the strategy, we had the tools, but it came down to like really trusting in our abilities and also leaning into the business and trusting that, hey, we got this, even though we don't have 30 years of marketing, but how many business owners actually have that? And it goes back to really the deep inner trust and cultivating that. It's also interesting to see how when we stop following the norms, we had a client that she didn't want to post on social media anymore. And she was like, I'm just tired of it. And through some coaching, we kind of got her into a space of acceptance of deleting all of social media, just deleting it off and using her leads that she was getting. She was a realtor. Long story short, she still is not back on social media and was getting leads and was doing better without the social media piece because it was in alignment with her. And so that gave her more time and space to free up to focus on her leads. And then all of a sudden she started doing the inner work and the coaching that we gave her and completely transferred, her whole life transformed, not just in a business, but then all of a sudden she was like, oh, I can take this and transform this now into my dating world. And it was just like this full circle moment. So again, business owners that think they only have an option to run their business on social media, like there's other options.
Yeah, again, so much to unpack. But first thing I'm thinking of is it reminds me of my whole approach and why for years I was doing primarily advising and consulting in like actual execution of marketing campaigns, right? So there's always an advising component to that. But when you're working with like sometimes with larger companies and there's an organization, there's a marketing and sales organization there. Sometimes it's very much about what's the best practices and whatever, right? And one of the things I love so much about flipping that around and having this more coaching approach is like, ultimately, it's not about me telling somebody this is what you need to do. I think that's nonsense, right? It's about me understanding what it is that works, what it is that they feel drawn to, where they're going to shine. If they're not social media, if they hate social media, there's no point whatsoever to get somebody to try to be great on social media if they hate it, right? The tricky part, though, is that, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this personally for yourself. Ultimately, there are certain approaches that can be more efficient, let's just say, right? So let's go back to the niche. Julie, you had mentioned before about like, people have said you need to niche down, right? And you think about it in first principles terms, like niching down and focusing on specific types of problems or types of clients makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases because you only have two of you and you only have so much time and energy and money to play around with to reach people, right? So when you think about things like that, when, what comes to mind for you when you have to make those decisions? And we could just talk about niching in particular, because I think this is something I talk a lot about, maybe a lot of people listening are struggling with. When you think about the choices you face, right? It's like, hey, there's millions of potential clients we could try to engage with or meet, but we only have so much bandwidth. How do you make those decisions about where to focus your time, where to go to, if you're going to do speaking or if you're going to come on a podcast or if you're going to write an article, like how do you make those decisions then, if not by like a niche kind of approach?
Emily, I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah. So for me, it's what's in alignment. What's in alignment with you as a business owner? So there may be seasons. There may be seasons that I do podcast interviews. There may be seasons that I speak. There may be season that I'm like, there's nothing on my calendar but revenue generating activities. And only as the business owner will you know what that alignment is for you. And that comes down to, again, really knowing yourself and how you operate. And I would say a huge part of this is human design. I'm a manifester. I work like one, and I very much have work sprints and I have rest periods. Julie does not work that way, right? So we know that about each other, and knowing this and fully stepping into my design was the best thing that I ever did for the business. So it's really understanding, how do I operate on a daily basis? What does that look like? And not shaming and guilting, because I went through this whole shame and guilt process of like, I should be in my work sprint like all the time, and then wondering why I was burned out. So it's like knowing what's in alignment and then getting clear on not going into that FOMO of like, oh, there's all these things that I could be doing, but what is it for this season, and staying there.
And I think like earlier today, I had a similar question where it was like, I think it was the exact same thing. And it's like, how, if someone wants to become a coach, so it's kind of similar, like what advice would you give them, or what like, based on like experience and things like that. And I'm like, well, think about two things, like what's naturally drawn to you and what are you naturally drawn to? So if you're naturally drawn to a specific industry, then do it. If you love that industry, like do it, right? But if you're not naturally drawn, I am like, we can help everybody. Let's help everybody, right? Like, because I truly believe that everyone needs spiritual development, self-development. You place whatever label you want on it, but I believe that everyone needs that just to be better humans. And I believe if we are better humans, we have better families, better lives, and better businesses, better companies, better organizations. So to me, I'm like, I don't know, we could say that our niche is like in one instance, like shitty people, like shitty leaders, right? And let's help you be better people.
That would definitely be a unique niche that you could own. Absolutely. At least when you phrase it that way. Yeah, now when it comes, especially with a partnership too, I imagine this can get more complex than when it's just one person who's the founder and they're making all the decisions. What does that look like? To what degree, whatever degree you want to share this? Because I know there's probably some stuff maybe that you're like, hey, listen, we're not going to share exactly how we, how we market ourselves, or whatever. But to whatever degree you want to share, what does that look like on a tactical level, right? So, whenever you're in these work sprints and these focus sprints and business development sprints, what does it actually look like when you're saying, hey, we could help so many different type of people, but we need to actually reach out to people in some way or attract, bring them in some way. What are some of the ways that you do that?
So there can be a variety of those ways. And as far as partnerships, like we're always open to any questions when it comes to partnerships. We've grown and evolved a lot as partnerships. So it can look a lot of different ways, but it kind of goes back to like, what is in alignment with me and what is in alignment with Julie? So for example, it could be an alignment for me to do outreach on LinkedIn because I don't mind doing it, right? It's pretty easy, it's pretty simple, or when I feel inspired to create content, then to do it. Now, Julie's approach may be completely different. So what we have done, what has worked for us is being like, okay, what is an alignment for us? And then what are those KPIs we want to set for that? And then running with that. So we're both still doing something just in our own way. And we respect each other to know that we both have a very different process, but we're still driving towards the same result. We're still driving towards the same goals. It just is going to look a little bit different. And there's no like judgment or you got to follow my way or we got to do this and then if it's like cold email or email campaigns, then a lot of times we tackle it differently. I'm always first draft, Julie's second draft, because that's how we operate. So we know that about each other because we've worked with each other. We know like what each other's strengths are and which other, like what we prefer and what we don't prefer.
And I think one of the things that Emily normally tells people when we get on calls with them is like, we are yin and yang. We are almost like perfectly opposite in every way, which it's so beautiful. And it's also given us the opportunity to deepen our communication. And so by deepening our communication with each other, we're also best friends. So being best friends, being business partners, and all of the things that we do. So we talk about everything, right? And so we get to just cultivate this level of like communication. And it's not always easy. It is not always easy. We have had some, literally just within this last couple of months, we've had times where we're like, seriously, where we're like, we don't know how we're going to come out on the other end of this. We know we're going to be stronger for it, but are we still going to be as close as we are? Are we still going to have the business? We've had to have that conversation. And it's just, I think for both of us, it's just this embodying the deep level of work that we've both done and knowing that it's okay to move through seasons and be this way or that way. And sometimes nothing is really permanent, right? So it's just honoring like where we're at, whether that's in like outreach, like Emily said. Um, and I think Emily's made this comment several times where she's an idea generator. She generates these beautiful, amazing ideas. And I'm this like, okay, let's try it. Like I would say probably 80 to 90% of the time, I'm like, okay, let's try it. There are times where I'm like, nope, nope, not doing that. Right. And but if it's out of, I don't think we've ever had the conversation. I think it's always just been an understanding where if it's out of alignment for one of us, no questions asked. It's just, it's out.
What's so interesting for me is this is probably the first type of conversation I've had like this with partners, business partners and best friends, where there's this obvious creative, and I'll say tension, not in a negative way, not a creative tension as in conflict, but this creative tension that creates this energy that in a lot of ways transcends a lot of the stuff that I would normally focus on in a conversation like this, right? So it's like it doesn't mean all the principles of marketing and sales go out the window, but we're talking now at a different level because there is a certain, you're tapped in with each other, first of all, with your own business experience. A lot of this stuff that maybe for some people is like brand new, for you is probably, you're very familiar with the language and you're very familiar with how to reach people and how to sell and all that stuff. So it might be more fluid for you, right? But I just love that. I love that, to your point earlier in our conversation, where you've spoken with people who have tried to sell you on here's how to 10x, whatever, here's how to get leads and all that. Where if they don't understand, first of all, where you two are coming from as people and as creators, then it doesn't really matter whether they're right or wrong. It's not going to fit because it starts with the authenticity, understanding for yourselves who you are, how you create, how you make decisions, how you iterate. How I'm sure with your point before, Julie, about you'll be like 80% of the time, let's try it. That probably means you probably have a reasonably comfortable acceptance of failure and that we're going to try something. It's not always going to work, right? There has to be
We
an
pivot.
great, huh?
We pivot.
We pivot well, and just going like it's all experiments, right? So I don't know, that it wasn't really a question there. I'm just throwing that on the table and see if either or both of you want to comment on that.
Yeah, one thing I will say is we're seeing this shift a lot, especially in the online business space, is businesses starting to shift more into a consciousness. And this kind of goes back into tap into the energy. Yeah, it sounds woo-woo. And yeah, you do still have to do some 3D tasks and you do still have to move your business forward. But we're going to see more and more businesses start to shift. And those that don't understand how to make that shift and start to play more into the spiritual realm, they get to learn that. And I'm super grateful that we had the opportunity to learn how to balance both. Like, how do you balance the 3D and with the spiritual side and the energy side, and at the same time show up, do the inner work, and still run a business? Because we've been there. That's what we've been balancing. So I think that's, I think I heard Kathleen Cameron say the other day on her podcast of like, business is consciousness, and we're going to see more and more of that as we go into the new age of Aquarius from the astrology standpoint, which that's another rabbit hole that we won't go down today, but that's part of it.
That's a whole nother episode series.
Yeah.
Right there.
And like for me, it's like, just like I said, the pivot, right? Like we view things from the perspective of like, there's always something to learn. And so if it's something like, if you enjoyed the experience and you want to repeat it, so what was the thing that you did specifically, directly, or, how do you like cultivate and recreate that? And if it's something that you do not choose to experience again, what's the lesson you get to learn in that aspect? So you don't have to do that again, right? Um, and so we've had plenty of opportunities to do that. And we, like Emily said, like we've really learned like how to balance individually and with each other and to play to each other's strengths and to like the whole like we'll take content creation, like if we're creating like emails and things like that, like she's like, I'll take first stab, and I'm like, thank you Jesus, like whew, right? And I'm like, because I much more prefer to have an outline of something already there and then to do like some editing to it and to put like a voice to it. her voice and my voice are also very different. Like, she's very direct, to the point, no bullshit, as she always says. And I'm like more of the fluffy funny, like, I'm funny. You wanna give, like, wait, what was that? That campaign that we did, oh, the grief campaign, and it's hilarious. And she's like, nah, you can miss me with that all day. And I'm like, I'm here for it. So I took pictures based on like the stage of grief, right? And I've got pictures where I look, and we got responses from it, right? So it's just being willing to try those things out. And there are there's just things that we both do, and things we don't do, that it just works.
I love that. I love that. And earlier, I don't know, it's before we hit record or right after, we were talking a little bit about intuition, right? And I've always been a big believer in following that, and call it your inner voice, whatever version of it you want, right? And then when we talk about creativity, business is a creative exercise, right? It's all creativity. To me, it's like art, right? Building a business, whether that also includes marketing and selling, to me, that's no less art than painting or music. And in order to be able to create something uniquely your own, not only do you have to be tapped into your own intuition, but you also have to be very aware of your strengths, which is what you were both just talking and sharing about. You're both very aware, self-aware, and co-aware, if that's a word, of each other's strengths, right? And saying like, hey, this is the stuff that I'm really good at. And that's one of the hobby horses that I keep pushing in the work that I do, because ultimately I see too many people trying to be, first of all, good at everything, which good luck, right? They're trying to be excellent at every aspect. They want to be, the full spectrum of abilities. But also, if you think about like who really excels in any field, it's the people that take their quirks, the things that make them unique and maybe weird, like me, and not that I'm saying I excel in the field, but you know what I'm saying. And I know what my strengths are, and I'm going to lean into that all day long. And I know the things that I hate doing, and if I try to make myself do that, I'd be miserable and I'd suck at it, right? So it seems like that's in general how you both operate, even if you might not word it that same way.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true.
I would agree.
Good.
I would agree.
I nailed it. There you go. Well, what are sometimes the challenges with that though? Because I think for some people listening, as we start to kind of wind down and we think about like people listening are like, that sounds great, but I got a mortgage. I just started the business. I hit a plateau. I lost my key client, like whatever it is, right? Where sometimes it's hard to trust that. It's hard to let go. It's hard to really lean into that. There must be, when you think of it for yourself, is it what's the word you think of? Like, I think for me, trust. That's something I'm learning, how to really trust the process, trust myself, trust my mind, my subconscious, the universe, whatever you want to call it, to allow that creative mechanism, that success mechanism to flow through me. What are the words you use and how you think about like to be able to relax enough to be able to allow that inner guidance to push you in the right direction?
So I would agree with trust, but I would also, where you said, maybe you have all these challenges coming up, you got the mortgage to pay and you got all these things coming up. So how do you really lean into your intuition? Well, maybe those challenges are coming up for you to take a few steps back and actually really trust your intuition. Because sometimes we don't listen to our intuition until we're slapped in the face with some things. And some of us learn the hard way, and we have to be knocked upside the face a few times before we actually learn to listen. And it goes back to trust, but it also goes back to faith, and having the faith that I can trust myself and trust what I am meant to do, my voice, and listen. And the biggest thing I will tell people listening is, if you want to tap into your intuition the quickest way, stop consuming content, because you don't understand how much energy and how much stuff you pick up when you consume content. So as a creator myself, when I go to to create content, I will not consume content, because I don't want to regenerate something that is not my voice and my authenticity. And so a lot of times you will see the same content over and over and over because they're using someone else's voice, because they don't trust their intuition enough, because they don't know their true voice. So if you take some time off, even just 2 to 3 days off, no social media, no nothing, and write and see what content comes out, that will start to be your true voice and your true intuition. Like, start trusting that.
That's a great idea. Julie, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think with intuition specifically, like we get this opportunity to like lean in and surrender, which can be really scary. So I think there's a level of surrender that gets to happen for a lot of us before we can move into that full faith and trust, right? Like you have to be, we have this thing where we talk about resistance, like, ooh, the resistance is there. So what do we get to do, right? So we get to look at, like, is the resistance for something there because it's not in alignment, or is the resistance there because whatever story is coming up? And if it's not in alignment, it feels much different. It's like gross, right? It feels gross. But if the resistance is there because it's an opportunity for us to lean in, to be vulnerable, to do something we don't want to do, sometimes it's happened for both of us where we're like, ooh, the resistance is there. And I know it's just because I need to lean in, but I'm not quite ready to lean in yet. So I'm going to sit here for a minute and be okay with knowing that it's there and I do get to lean into it when I'm ready. And then sometimes we're like, okay, I don't feel ready, but I'm just going to do it, right? Like, because procrastination can come in and things like that. So it's a practice, right? It's like meditation, it's like yoga, it's like journaling, like it's a practice. You just lean in. It sounds much easier than it is in some instances, until you get to the point where you're so used to leaning in that you just lean in. And then you just lean in some more. And then, like, Emily's intuition over this past year has exploded to the point where she says something, I'm like, yep, got it. Like, yes, like it just is, right? And like cultivating that. And Emily, I don't know if you want to speak to that journey a little bit, but it's really just, sometimes we know what we know and we don't know why we know it. And then sometimes, like Emily said, like the universe is showing you things, and if you're not listening, we've all had this happen where it just blows up in our face if we're not willing to be there, right? And it's beautiful if you're open to learning from it.
And I would just add for those that want to know, like, how do I practice this on a daily basis? It's as simple as using your intuition when you go to the grocery store. Like, ask yourself, is my body opening or closing? Because a lot of times, like, our body will open or close, right? We can start to listen to our body to start to trust our intuition. Or my intuition tells me to go left. I have no idea why. So I'm going to go left and see what happens, and play around with it and have fun. Because as you do that and you start seeing things of like, ooh, I went left and then I got a free parking spot, and then, it all worked out so beautiful. You're like reiterating to your mind of like, oh, I can trust my intuition. Like, write down and really remember like all the great decisions that you have made and that you've trusted yourself. So then when it comes to your business, you can be like, yeah, I trust this. Even though logically this is crazy, no idea where this idea came up, but I'm trusting myself. And for me, I've had to let go of a lot of stories, a lot of constructs, and also remember that I'm here to be a trailblazer. I will never follow the crowd. I will be the first one to be like, yeah, fuck your rules. I'm going to make my own rules, and I'm going to play how I want, when I want, and wherever I want. And that's how I move. But it takes a lot of practice to step into that. And you can do it as simple as when you go to the grocery store. What do I really want today to eat? And trust your intuition, because you'll know.
And you can start with like the little things first. Like she said, I had a friend years ago say something like, who cares? Like, how do you know if your intuition's right? Who cares? Just do the thing.
That actually, that's perfect segue into the last question I want to ask you. And this is also from a personal place. when it like if it is it right, like judged by what, right? So one of the things is, even though over the last decade I've been practicing certain things that allow me to tap into my own instincts better and my own intuition and my, all that guidance. What was missing until relatively recently was the ability for me to really be very clear about where I wanted to go, even if that was coming from an authentic place. But I had always struggled with like visualization, with clarifying a goal. Like I could write down a goal, right? I could say, I want to do this, but and there's a reason I'm bringing this up, because I think hopefully people listening will be able to relate to this. My tendency was to be so pulled by the stuff I don't want. I'm in a lot of ways a recovering pessimist, right? I think I was raised to be a pessimist. I don't think it's who I am. But I would be so worried about, what if this happened? What if that happened? Well, isn't it amazing how you wind up, like, if I'm worried about what if I just barely get by? Well, it's amazing how you just barely get by, right? So I would have the whatever I felt was my intuitive kind of direction, but the compass was off, right? And so the last few months, especially, I've been really making a lot of progress personally on getting much better at being able to grow the size of that, like where in my brain, the wiring going toward what I actually want and what I believe I can create, as opposed to the limited kind of conditioned stuff that we a lot of times struggle with. If that makes any sense to you whatsoever, I'd like to, just as we close out, your thoughts on, where do goals even fit in? Where does vision even fit in? Is intuition really just, you're just taking each step as it goes, and then the path unfolds in front of you the way it's going to unfold? Or is it like, hey, our intuition is telling us we really want this. We're going to get very clear on that vision, and however we do that, and then we're going to allow our intuition to guide us there? Or is it both? Or is it neither?
It's both.
Okay.
It's 100% both. Like you're guided by that something bigger, right? But just you can't just live on hope and faith and a prayer, right? You have to do things. You have to do the things. So you set the goals that align to the vision. And Emily introduced this game. She plays it with her boys. Like, wouldn't it be cool if? So it gives us an opportunity to play and have fun. And like it's almost like sometimes, and Emily, I would love for you to speak into this because it's a thing that I love to hear you talk about. But when we talk about the vision of our organization, what we do, there have been times where we're like, holy shit, the vision it's too big. Just too big. Like early on, we're like, oh, this is too big. That's scary because it's so big. And when we play the game and we broaden and open more, then we get to a point where, what was the dollar amount we talked about the other day? Oh, I think it was like $5 million. Like $5 million doesn't even sound big anymore. Like you get to that place, right? So Emily, I'll let you speak into all of that.
Yeah, I would just say one of the things that has been really a game changer for me is sitting back, and just to kind of touch back to with the pessimistic, like we focus so much on what we don't want, but we are all walking around with some kind of frequency in us. It's our dominant feeling. So we think on a daily basis how we are walking around in a dominant feeling. Am I focusing on what I don't want, or am I focusing on what I do want? And then playing the game of like, wouldn't it be cool if? And then also playing the game of, I would love my end result to be this, and that's how it's going to be, and playing into the law of assumption. The law of assumption is a really cool thing, and I've been using it. I did it with traffic the other day. The GPS said like I was going to show up at this time, and I'm like, no, like I'm going to assume that I'm going to show up actually 10 minutes earlier than that, and boom, it happened. And I was like, whoa, that's so freaking cool, because I assumed that I let it go, and I stopped watching my GPS. Like I wasn't like sitting there like frantically looking, like I just set it and moved on. So a lot of times we focus on what we don't want, where how much time are we actually focusing on what we would love? So it's just making a daily ritual of, and sometimes I will write this out. I'm not a huge like, oh, visualize, blah, 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 blah. I more so tap into the feeling of like, what's my end result going to be like? And, how am I celebrating? How do I feel? And, if my feeling is accomplishment or successful or happy, then those are the feelings that I'm going to embody today. I'm not going to wait until my end result to feel like a multimillionaire. I'm not going to wait to feel successful. I want my frequency, my dominant feeling today to be that, to be confident, to be bold, to be courageous, to be like the multimillionaire that I am. So that way because you come from a different frequency, you operate in a different way versus like, well, which shoe's going to drop today? Because we don't know. So it's just very like you could feel the shift. And so whether that means, setting timers, writing notes to yourself, or however you can remember, where am I operating from? And it kind of goes back to what we teach in leaderships. Like, at what capacity can you lead in chaos? Can you stay calm in chaos? And the same thing with your mind. Can you lead your mind to be in your heart and your soul and to have it aligned? And there's tons of tools, and we can talk about that all day, but those are just some of them that I would suggest.
And I think that where you're saying like you were pessimistic and you were like, we are literally all programmed to be that way. So like if anyone feels that they're pessimistic or feels that they're negative, it's not your fault. You're not alone. Like you are literally being inundated with programming everywhere you look, everywhere you turn, from the music that you listen to, the television shows that you watch, to the people that are in your life that are speaking to you. And it's awareness. Like if we are aware that we're being pessimistic or that we're being negative or whatever, and we're really great at seeing the things that we don't want. So make a list of everything that you don't want. And then for each point of thing that you don't want, write down what you do want, and then cross out that list of the things you don't want. That's no longer in your existence. Like move it out, right? Now you have this list of the things that you do want. You focus on that list. And a thing that I love to do is like the words I am, and then you put whatever it is behind it. What do you want? Right? And you can say this, it's in the book, A Happy Pocket Full of Money. And I know other people talk about this too, but when we say I am prosperous, I am wealth, I am in a thriving business, I am experiencing $10 million, whatever you want, right? But and so for me, I get to play with the verbiage and the language, and I get to play with what does that look like? And then from that, like Emily said, the feeling, what's that feeling? And standing in front of the mirror, looking yourself dead in the eyes and saying these things, I'm a wealthy woman. I guarantee people will stand in front of the mirror and they will have some things that they want. They genuinely and truly want these things. But when they stand in front of that mirror and then look themselves in the eyes and they say the thing, they cringe, they cower, their body moves in because they're like, oh, but I don't believe that I deserve it. I don't believe that I'm enough, right? And you just keep showing up every single day, and you keep, every time you go to the bathroom, you drink enough water, you're going to the bathroom a lot, right? So you say it every single time, and then you're retraining your brain.
Special thanks to Julie Tritch and Emily Adams for sharing their insights about embracing an authentic approach to marketing your services. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you'll consider subscribing and leaving a review. And don't forget to visit marcusschaller.com/subscribe for weekly troubleshooting guides and tips to help you find and fix the weak spots in your marketing that are holding you back, fine-tune your positioning and marketing strategy, and start growing again by attracting more of your ideal clients. Again, that's marcusschaller.com/subscribe.